Hey, Danny Matta here, founder of PT Biz, and today we're going to talk about the number one killer of cash practices that I'm seeing in the market right now. Over the last 8 years, I've had a chance to work with a little over 1,000 cash-based and hybrid clinics. And it's been interesting to see trends in the market, things that are happening. When I started my practice, my first business that I ever started was a cash-based physical therapy clinic, and this is in 2014. The landscape of clinics at that time was very different. So number one, there weren't many. It also was a model that many people thought was unscalable. And I thought it was unscalable. As well. I thought this is going to be a lifestyle business, but it's going to let me treat patients the way that I want, spend enough time with them, still be able to, make a good income, be able to make more than I could working somewhere else. And that was okay for me. Like, that was the trade-off I was willing to take. Now, as we look at how those things have evolved, really, this is 11 years later. That's a significant amount of time, and a lot of things have changed. And one of the big things is there's way more cash-based practices, right? There's way more small practices, hybrid practices, and I think it's a very positive thing generally for healthcare, for our profession, and for individuals that are looking for people to work with. But when we look at other factors, economic factors that have happened, especially in the last 5 years, we've seen a lot of inflation occur, which is basically things have gotten more expensive, right? So as things have gotten more expensive, a lot of clinics that that we work with, one of the bigger challenges they have is how do they keep pace with that, as well as keep pace with salary adjustments needed for their staff to be able to afford to live their lives. And this is a tricky thing to do, not just in our business, any business, right? I mean, I had a conversation this morning with another business owner in a completely separate industry, and they were seeing a similar trend, which is, essentially businesses that are starting to get squeezed, right? So if we look at the iPad here and kind of go over what I'm seeing and what I think the biggest risk is, we have to first start with understanding the difference between gross revenue and net profit, okay? So this is fairly straightforward, but sometimes people confuse these. Because when they talk about the revenue of a business, it can be confusing because there's a lot of different terms for this. But gross revenue or gross revenue, or just revenue in general, for most people, just means how much money did the business make before any expenses, taxes, anything like that. So let's just take an example of a $1 million gross revenue clinic. So that's how much they're generating in revenue in the year. They have a net income, or what's left over, which is net profit. So after you have all of your expenses, payroll, all the things that you're paying for in the year, your overhead, like your facility, everything like that, what do you have left at the end of the year? That's your net profit for the year, okay? So in this scenario, let's say it's $1 million gross revenue clinic, and you have $100,000 left over, which, by the way, if you're listening to this on the podcast and you want to get a visual example of this, head to the PT Biz YouTube channel and you can watch it there. Now, that would be a 10% gross revenue business. So $1 million of revenue, that's a 10% net profit business. So $1 million of gross revenue, 10% of it is net profit, which is $100,000. Now, if we take the same example and we say, okay, we have the same $1 million gross revenue business, but it's a 20% net profit business. Now that's $200,000. So this is a big difference, right? It's a difference of $100,000 of money that you're retaining in the business or you're paying to yourself over the course of the year. Now, if you had to choose which of these two businesses would you like to own, you're probably going to pick the second option, right? $200,000 in net profit, which is a significant amount more than $100,000, right? You've doubled your net profit. So here's why this is really important, because net profit, it gives us options. And the biggest killer that I see in cash practices, and honestly would correlate to in-network practices as well, is lower net profit margins, especially over the last 5 years as everything has become more expensive. That's just not just your salaries, that's your rent, that's the supplies you're buying. That's education, courses you're sending people to. That's insurance. I mean, for God's sakes, like if you just look at your auto insurance, look at your home insurance, and that doesn't even include, maybe you don't even have a business yet, but business insurance and insuring that has gone up exponentially over the last few years. So just insurance alone can make a massive difference. So what we're seeing is these businesses, their gross revenue is continuing to go up. So what they're making before expenses is continuing to go up, but their net profit is getting squeezed. And it's because everything has gotten more expensive and the people that they are employing are having to be paid more because life has gotten more expensive for them and the market has to keep up with that. So what happens in between? Your net profit gets squished. It gets what we call like death by 1,000 paper cuts. So these little things that affect it, there may be a dozen things that affect your net profit, 1% each. Now all of a sudden it's 12% down. So this is the biggest issue that I see with these businesses today. And the net profit that you have is so important because it gives you options. We're going to get into that and the options that you have. The other big problem that this leads to is what I call owner fatigue. So one thing I've noticed, this can happen as early as like 3 years in for some people. For most people, it comes around like 5 years into running their business. And at the 5-year mark, if a business is it doesn't have very much net profit, that means that the owner is killing themselves still to keep the business going in the right direction, which running a business is hard no matter what. Like it doesn't get easier necessarily, but you should be shifting some of the responsibilities that you have to other people. And around this 3 to 5 year mark, owners get just burnt out. It's sort of like clinicians. If they're working in a high volume setting, this tends to happen to them in the same time period, right around 3 to 5 years out, right? I mean, we can tolerate pain for a while until we can't. So at that 3 to 5 year mark, the root cause of this problem, like the real issue, is that they don't have enough net profit to be able to do a few things. So when we look at these things, number one is reinvest in managers. So if you don't have any money left in the business, you don't have any profit left in the business, you can't bring in sort of mid-level leaders, which would be considered managers or leadership roles within the business. Historically, in a clinic, this is considered a clinic manager, right? Or a clinic director. You may also have a administrative assistant that is, has a lot more advanced skills, and that person could maybe move into an operations director role in a bigger clinic. But in a smaller clinic, if you don't have the margins, you can't pay those people. You can't pay higher skill people. So you end up having to just work with fulfillers more so, and people that aren't necessarily managing solving problems. So who's managing and solving all the problems? Well, it's you, right? And that, while doing that and doing everything else for the business, it really starts to wear you down over the course of a few years. So this owner fatigue that we see sets in, and the real reason, well, there's two reasons. One, maybe they're terrible at actually developing systems and being able to empower other people to do a job. Maybe they're really bad at hiring and retaining, people that are A players and leaders within the business. You got to learn how to become a better business owner as far as that goes, right? And that's its own set of problems. And I'm not going to address those today as much as the nuts and bolts of like the numbers of how you would even keep those people around, which requires money, requires you paying them. And it also requires you incentivizing your staff with competitive salaries and compensation in order for them to not churn and leave, which is a huge burden on the business. Like every time a staff member turns over, which is going to happen, by the way, there's no way you can avoid that. But if you can avoid too much of that happening or unnecessary churn, it's going to make the growth of that business so much less turbulent, faster, and more enjoyable to run. So not having enough profit takes away from your ability to reinvest in managers. So number one. Number two, build big enough cash reserves that you can decrease stress. This is another huge problem that happens from this. So if you have such small net profit that you don't have money that you're able to build your cash reserves up, which for us, we recommend having 3 months to 6 months of both business and personal expenses. This is so that you can sleep well at night. All right. I know, maybe you could put that money into many other things, but you can just park it in a high yield savings account. And then, if anything bad happens, you have a runway of cash, which gives you options and makes you sleep better at night. That's what we recommend. But for a lot of business owners, they can't build those up because they don't have enough profit from the business. And that profit doesn't allow them to hire managers. It doesn't allow them to build cash reserves. So they're always working a ton, doing all kinds of stuff, and then they're feeling stressed because they don't have enough cash. So if there's like a bad month or seasonal changes, like we know December is very slow for cash-based businesses, like you have so much more stress and you freak out. And it's a really bad place to be. I've been there. It's not the best way to run a business. It's actually very, very stressful. So these are two big things. And then the third thing is it doesn't allow you to build wealth outside of your business. So if you don't have any profit from your business, how are you going to then take that and invest that in other things outside the business? That then de-risks all your net worth being tied up into this business asset that may or may not ever be able to be exited, right? Like you may or may not ever be able to sell it. These are very sellable businesses if you build them the right way, but a lot of people do not. And if you have super low net profit, who's going to want to buy that, right? Like it's not necessarily a business that someone's going to want to buy. So these are the three big things. You can't reinvest in mid-level managers, so you're always doing too much work. You cannot build your cash reserves, so you're always more stressed out, and you cannot build wealth outside of your business because everything's tied up in it, and you're just constantly reinvesting and growing the business and hiring people and paying those people, but you never have enough profit to actually take money and put it into things to build wealth outside of it. And these can be incredibly, stressful things to have to deal with. And imagine having to deal with all of them for 5 years, right? And not getting to a point where you can actually build the wealth up outside the business or hire people that can help you offset a lot of the work that you need to do. So when you look at the options for this, when you look at net profit, there's really two ways to increase this. Okay, and let me back up for a second. You may be going through a phase in your business right now where your net profit is lower, but your business is growing quickly. And that's totally normal, by the way. So let me caveat this. There are certain stages of your business where you're going to have far less profit. You're moving into a new standalone space. You're hiring staff on. You're growing. You're investing profit into the business. This is normal. You have to do that, right? But over the course of 5 years, you should get to a point where those growth cycles level out and you have profitability. And if you do not, then you need to focus on the next two things that I'm talking about, okay? So if you're going through a growth cycle, that's all right. There's nothing wrong with that. That's totally normal, and you're gonna have to do that. And they suck, but they're necessary. But if you're 5 years out and you have no profit in the business, you're missing the mark on something. And it's probably one of these two things. So, all right, how do we increase the net profit of a business, right? So this is the actual $1 million question. Well, there's two things you can do. You can decrease expenses or you can increase revenue. That's pretty much it. You can decrease expenses, you can increase revenue. For most business owners, the increased revenue or the decreased expenses, that's not going to get them too far. That might get you, I don't know, $1,000 or $2,000 a month of decreased expenses, which it's very important to go through and actually look at your expenses every year. This is something that consulting companies call zero cost budgeting or line item budgeting, where you should go through once a year and just look at your expenses, see if there's any redundancies, and see if there's things you're paying for that are just not they're not useful things for the business. And this happens a lot with technology, by the way. We'll get overlapping technology, and you're paying for these on a subscription, so you can actually lean up the business a little bit there, but it's not going to make a massive difference, right? Let's say you could just decrease by $1,000 to $2,000 here in your expenses. You're talking about $12,000 to $24,000 a year, which, okay, that's not an insignificant amount of money. But it's not going to move the needle that much, right? The big issue that I see is right here. So it's in revenue. And when we audit businesses, we look at what their average visit rate is and how many visits per month a provider is seeing, we're finding that business owners, these clinic owners, their staff is just not efficient enough. And for many of them, they're hovering somewhere around $180,000 to $220,000. So $180,000 to $220,000 per year per provider. Now that might sound like a lot of money, but let me put it in perspective. For if you're competing against having to hire people that are going to go work for a large to mid-size in-network clinic that's going to have them seeing a lot more volume, that clinician's probably generating somewhere in the ballpark of like $300,000 or more, 300, 325, somewhere in that range of gross revenue per provider for that clinic. So if you're making 180 to 220, and this other clinic, let's say, is making 320, and you're on the high end, you're at a minus $100,000. Now, they may have more expenses that they have to pay for and things because they're dealing with insurance, they have more administrative burden, but it's not making up that much of a difference. And so they can afford a higher salary, better benefits, these things that are going to retain and attract like higher quality people. Now, you may be able to say, hey, we have better work-life balance or lower volume, and that'll only get you so far. Like if you're not paying them enough, that'll only get you so far. So the problem is this. The problem is the fact that there's a $100,000 difference that needs to be made up for. And what we need to see is providers moving up to where they're generating in the range of $300,000. So getting close to where you're at with an in-network clinic. So when we look at that, like the difference is exponential, because let's say you have somebody, a clinician that's generating $200,000 in your clinic, right? And now let's say you have 5 of them. Well, you're going to generate $1 million in revenue per year off those 5 providers. If you take that and you make that $300,000 per provider, that's an additional $500,000 to the business in revenue, top line revenue. That changes what you can afford to pay people. That changes how much it hurts to feel a difference in insurance going up for your business. That changes a lot in terms of it's X amount more to send somebody to a Con Ed course or for a flight or whatever it might be. And it gives you the ability to reinvest in your people, to reinvest in your space, and to have significant net profit left over. So net profit is the problem. Net profit is getting squeezed. Net profit is really what matters. I was in a business group that they track a lot of metrics. And they would always say, gross revenue is a vanity number. Net profit is what really matters, which is true. We track lots of things with the clients that we work with. Net profit is way easier to track just because a lot of people they have poor accounting or they're very slow to get you numbers. New business owners in particular, they're busy with all kinds of other things, or it hurts too much for them to look at their finances, so they just avoid it. So it's an easy thing to track, and I think there's value in that. You can see it going up, but at the end of the day, what really matters is how much money you have left over, and that's net profit, right? So here's the question then: how do we increase net profit? If we know that this is the problem, we can either decrease expenses or we can increase revenue. If we can do both at the same time, it puts us in a much better place. But the one that's going to move the needle the most is going to be revenue, increasing revenue. And this is where there's somewhat of a catch-22, because things have gotten more expensive for everyone, not just you, not just me, not just business owners, anybody, consumers in general, people that work somewhere else that are clients of yours. So you may be asking yourself, how can I charge more if everyone else is feels the squeeze a bit more in terms of disposable income that they have? Well, that's a great question. And that comes down to your sales process, your price point, recurring service that you have, and more than anything, it's your brand. It's your ability to have a brand that people view not as a commodity, but as I have to work with these people because they're perfect for me. And that is your business. That's your culture. That's the day in and day out work you do to set the tone of how your business works with people and the decisions that you make, right? And that allows you to have a better sales process, meaning you're tracking all your metrics, and you know what your drop-off points are. You know what percent of people that you talk to turn into a client, what percent of those people turn into somebody that gets a plan of care, what percent of those people turn into somebody that does a recurring service. You're very clear on your numbers, right? So you have a tight ship in terms of how you're running your business. Your price point is the other massive contributor to this, right? So your sales process being really solid is what leads to the volume. The price point is what you multiply the volume by to get you your gross revenue. And if I'm charging $150 a visit versus if I can charge $250 a visit, massive difference in terms of what I can generate per provider. And if the goal is for us to go from $200,000 a provider up to $300,000 a provider and trend up that direction, well, we have to have either more volume or more revenue per hour of productive work. And we're probably not going to take on more volume. You're not going to have your people see double visits, whatever. So what you're going to do is you're going to have to increase your price point. And that's tied to your brand. That's tied to your sales processes, your systems in your business, and what you can actually justify because of the training you're doing in your team. And most of you, to be totally honest with you, probably undercharging what the outside world views for your value. And healthcare is just like tricky thing that honestly, like most people have a poor healthcare experience. If we can have a great experience and we can show people, that we can really help them get outcomes and we can help them achieve the things that they want to do and get back to activities they love, people are far less price sensitive to that, and even right now, as we've seen some downturns in many different businesses, like hiring freezes, people are kind of a little bit more on the fence about making buying decisions. This is nothing. This is legitimately where we're at, 5 months into the year. Even with that, we're seeing many of our clinics have PR months because they have built a really good brand and they have really good systems and they do a great job of getting people the results they want. There's always going to be a market for that, and people are willing to pay more than what you think. The last thing is to really be able to continue to focus on your recurring services, because these recurring services, and we'll just take as an example, something like, semi-private, like small group training. This is something where you can have a really productive hour, right? So let's say you have on average $50 per session that somebody's paying to train with your staff twice a week, right? So they're going to end up paying, what is that, $400 roughly a month. So they're paying $50 a session. Let's say you have 6 people that are in that group. That's a $300 hour for that one, clinician that's running that class. That's a really good dollar productive hour, right? Now, if there are $300 an hour there and you have an average visit rate that's pushing up north of like 200 to 250, this is where we start to make the adjustments we need and to gain the traction we need to get us to the point where we're able to, push our revenue per provider up to that $300,000 per provider range. Because if we can do that, this is the key. If you can do that, you're going to be able to get the best people, hire the best people. Because if I can say, okay, you can go work for this high volume clinic where you're going to be seeing, let's call it 50, 60 people, a week, probably more, 60 maybe, right? Somewhere in that range. Zero, sort of time flexibility, poor work-life balance. You're going to be getting burnt out. You can make the same amount working for us. You could see half the amount of volume. We prioritize work-life balance. We have whatever built-in time off during the week for staff. And like that exchange, like which one do you want to pick? Do you want to be over here or do you want to be over here? And the compensation benefits are the same. We win that like damn near every single time. Better environment to work in, more specific population that they like to work with, able to use their skill set in a very, very pure way where they can enjoy being a clinician again, and you make the same and have the same benefits. We win. The problem is the revenue per provider is too low. And in order to get that up, you have to have a strong brand, a dialed in sales process. You need to be tracking everything. You need to put your price point where it deserves to be. And you need to focus on additional recurring services that are going to add value and decrease your need for just massive amounts of new patients. that is how you build that up and you build a robust business that has the revenue in place to be able to have the margins that you need to then, if we go back up here, to then be able to do this, get mid-level people in place. Take 15 hours a week of work off your plate by being able to have people that are then taking these skills on, these roles on, that you have trained them how to do with your systems, so that now you can take that time back. And it's a long process. This is a long game. Everybody can work their ass off, okay, for a certain period of time. Some people can work their ass off for longer than others. If you are just banking on the fact that you can just crush yourself for a long period of time, I got news for you. Eventually, you're going to run into a wall and you're not going to be able to do it anymore. And that's where you're going to look to exit. You're going to look to get out of there. You're going to look to fire sale your business. Maybe you shut it down. And we've seen this happen. We've seen this with clients we've worked with that have, kind of graduated from our mastermind and are alumni of ours, and they just never get to the point where they're able to bring people in that are mid-level positions, and they just shut their business down and move on to a completely different career. I've seen this happen multiple times, and I see people trending this direction all the time. And a lot of it is because it's like they don't see the end. Imagine if you're just killing yourself every week and you see no end in sight. How long could you possibly do that for? It's defeating. I mean, for a lot of people, they would rather just go work for somebody else than just crushing themselves and not seeing like an end in sight for their business, even though there's all these positive benefits to running the business. So in order to get yourself in a place where you can have the endurance to do this for a long period of time, you have got to be able to bring on mid-level positions. You've got to be able to have enough profit to be able to build cash reserves to feel safe and not be stressed out all the time. And you have to be able to take money from the business and invest it outside the business, because you can't just bank on a liquidity event of you selling your business. Now, you can have that as part of your sort of net worth strategy and what you're trying to do. And if you do things right, you very much can sell your business. Like this happens, multiple times a year with clients that we work with in the mastermind, and we help them with the sales process, with counter offers and all kinds of things. But I can tell you a lot more businesses won't sell than will, because for them to actually sell, they have to be set up correctly. And it takes a lot of work. It takes a really, really strong business owner to be able to do that, to remove themselves from the day-to-day and to have the net profit to be able to be a sellable asset, right? So all of these things are intertwined with how much money you have left over. So again, in summary, if you find yourself feeling squeezed, you have to look at decreasing expenses, which, by the way, that's probably not going to do it that much for you. Like, I'm just saying, like, you should look at it. You should understand what you're spending your money on in your business. And that is a very important part of running a business, being fiscally responsible. But that's not going to change it as much as increasing revenue, building a strong brand, having a strong sales process, making sure you have your systems dialed in, charging what you're worth, and building recurring services that decrease your need to have new patient volume and have high dollar productive hours for your staff that aren't just seeing patients. That is the path forward for these businesses to really be able to have the margins that we need in order to grow, scale, and to have that business owner not feel like it's this burden to continue to run the business. So if you are dealing with this problem yourself, you're not alone. This is something that we actively help people with all the time. It's a very difficult problem to solve, I'll be very honest with you. Very difficult problem to solve, because the mindset around this, think about this for a second. Not only do you have to improve your systems, improve your tracking, improve training of your staff, maybe let staff go that shouldn't really be there in the first place, that maybe you've been holding off on doing and you've been avoiding a difficult conversation. But you also have to be able to change your price point to where it should be. And for some people, that could be the difference of like $100 a session. That feels very scary. People will get very scared and they're like, oh, everybody's going to stop working with me. They're going to leave. And you probably will have some people that leave, no doubt about it. But do you want to save your business, right? Like, do you want to actually put yourself in a place where you're able to have a really thriving business, something you could sell one day, something that could be autopiloted, something that could be more passive, something that can pay your staff better, something that can provide better lives for the people that work with you? Like, you got to ask yourself if you're willing to make these tough decisions and have these difficult conversations and do this difficult work for the end result that I'm talking about. And if it is, like that's a worthy thing to do. That's an important thing to work towards. And this is something, like I said, we help people with all the time. If you are in this boat, if you're trending this direction, I highly recommend you reach out to us at physicaltherapybiz.com. Just go there. You can see what we have to offer. You can pick a time to chat with one of our advisors. We can dig into your business. But this is a difficult time for businesses across the board. I talk to business owners every single week in many different types of businesses. And this is a difficult time to run a business. There's a lot of unknown, uncertainty. People don't know what they should or shouldn't do. Nobody really wants to take a big swing on something right now and allocate, towards something because of how fast things can change with, different regulations, different economic policies that are being, proposed and changed and all kinds of stuff. So it's a transitionary period that's very kind of sketchy to run a business in right now. So, you need to really get your stuff dialed in. And it's kind of like you're rowing out into, the ocean in a little dinghy, and you have no experience dealing with ocean, waves and currents and all kinds of stuff. And you may not even know what's going to happen to you. Like it's a dangerous situation to try to figure this stuff all out on your own in a period of time like this, versus for us to be able to work with hundreds of businesses at the same time, see trends across the country, across different niches and demographics, and quickly be able to give people information to make the right decisions and pivot at the right time. This is why in the 8 years we've been working with people, we've only lost one business when we were actually working with them to like a bad financial decision, bad business decision. One out of 1,000 is where we're at. That's it. And it's because the group together, the ability to aggregate information is so powerful and so helpful that it allows you to not just feel like you're in isolation trying to make decisions with blinders on. And that's a massive difference. So you got to ask yourself, is this a time when you're trying to figure this out all on your own, or is it time for you to actually get help on your business and get plugged into the data and the information and the people that are all across the country? They can really help get you through this uncertain time and put your business in a better place, because there will be people that go out of business. There will be people that get tired and just quit and they shut their business down. I promise you that'll happen. That's happening right now. And that means as we get into, calm waters eventually at some point, there's going to be a lot more market share to take. So the people that can thrive and the people that can weather a storm and even grow through that, I mean, gosh, you're in such a big different position to be able to capitalize and continue to grow. So keep that in mind. That's the one question I would pose to you. Do you want to figure this out all on your own? Is this the right time to figure it out on your own? Why are you trying to figure it out on your own? And if you want to do that, great, go for it. If you want to make sure that you're doing the right things and you're getting an unfair advantage of information and mentorship from people that have already done what you're trying to do and already navigated difficult business situations over the last 10 years, it might be worth your time to take a look at what we're doing. So head to physicaltherapybiz.com, check it out. As always, thanks so much for listening and watching, and I'll catch you next time.